Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the podcast. And today I want to talk about this Harvard Harris poll that recently came out that paints a picture of victory for Donald Trump and how this is going to affect the 2024 election. This poll actually includes a lot of stats between like favorability ratings of different people, of figureheads in the United States. It goes over the important issues of the country. It goes over Donald Trump and Joe Biden in head-to-head matchups, as well as adding in Cornell West and RFK Jr., which are going to affect the presidential election. So this video is mainly going to be so people who, are just getting into politics or people that are in politics, they're able to kind of have a general overview of me explaining like what's really going on here, and they can have a basic understanding of what's going to occur in the next year or so. Before we start the video, like the video and subscribe to the channel because I'm going to be posting a lot more content like this as we keep going. And here we go. So basically this is a Harvard Harris poll that came out recently, and they basically talk a lot about voters, who they're going to vote for, what the important issues are, certain opinions on like the candidates, etc. So this poll was conducted from October 18th to the 19th, and it was among 2,100 voters or so like 2,100 voters, approximately, which is a pretty good poll, and the margin of error is plus or 2%. So there's not going to really be too much room for this to necessarily be super off. I mean, this poll isn't necessarily the best poll for Republicans or Donald Trump himself. And as you can see here, the results were weighed for age within gender, region, race/ethnicity, marital status, household size, income, employment, education, political party, and political ideology. So they factored in a lot of different, elements of people and kind of weighted, to get the most accurate results that they could. So right now we're going to be going over the approval and mood of the country. Right here, this is kind of the wrong track, right track kind of thing. And pretty much it basically asks, voters, like, how do you feel about the country? Do you think we're going on the right track? And somebody could say yes or no, or they'd be unsure. And it actually breaks it down by party. So as you could see, the country's right track has actually gotten slightly better in the past couple of months here. As you could see, from January 2023 to October 2023, you could see here that it was a 61 and 32 in January, and it's kind of gone down to 33.58. So really it kind of went down to the same 33% here, but the disapproval has gone down slightly according to this poll. Now, a lot of other polls from like CNN, Fox News, like all the bigger polls, Emerson and all these things kind of have it way higher. Like sometimes it's like in the high 70s, like not high 70s, like low 70s, high 60s. So this could be a little bit off because this is particularly close, but this does match the general trend of, approval ratings in general, because usually the right track, wrong track did get pretty close in the beginning of 2021, especially after the riots and all that stuff kind of happened after Trump left office. You can clearly see here that the right country approval actually surpassed here, which usually in most polls and in most aggregates, when they average out all the polls, it's never been in the positive. It got closer in the beginning of 2021, but this poll actually has it to where it was actually in the positive. But really overall, this very big spread of disapproval, plus 20 points, is going to really spell a big problem for Joe Biden in the 2024 election if he were to become the nominee, because right now, half of Dems, roughly a little bit over half of them, say the country's on the right track, which is a pretty bad number for an incumbent president. Usually an incumbent president's number on this tends to be a lot higher if they are doing the job correctly. And in this case, almost half of Dems, a little bit over half of them say we're on the right track, which is pretty low. A quarter of independents say that we're on the right track, and only a tenth of Republicans say the same. Now, this is the economy. On the economy, the approval rating is even worse, because here you have compared to here, independents, it's slightly higher, but with Republicans, it's a little bit 1% worse, but the spread is a lot worse than for the right track. So the economy, throughout, 2018, 2019, it actually kind of, was sort of in the positive, and a lot of aggregates and polling, especially in the end of 2019, had the economy very good. The approval rating for Trump on the economy was higher than his own approval rating. His approval rating, I think, hit 49%, which was the best it ever was. So a lot of people in the beginning and end of 2019 actually thought Trump was going to have a pretty easy time winning re-election because of his approval ratings there. However, clearly in 2020, after the pandemic, we kind of had, this very wrong track kind of spike up, and then the economy approval rating was better in the beginning of 2021, and then as inflation kind of hit, you kind of had this very big surge in disapproval of the economy. And ever since, Biden's pretty much been in office ever since June, July, it's gotten significantly worse. So this is going to be another talking point that Trump's going to try to pull, against Biden and try to say, hey, my economy was a lot better 4 years back, which realistically, if you look at inflation rates, if you look at the price of gas, if you look at grocery prices, if you look at, regulation of businesses, this is, Trump's economy was objectively better than Biden's, just period. I mean, because even though Biden quote unquote has more job creation, a lot of those jobs were jobs that were lost during the pandemic. Some of those are government jobs that are not necessarily, applying to middle class citizens or, lower class citizens, or regular jobs such as like a Subway or like, local business. It's not really the same exact job. And a lot of those jobs are not even keeping up with the raises of prices of inflation. So they kind of try to paint the job creation that's really high as a good thing, but it's really not keeping up with inflation and wages. Now here we have perceived strength of the U.S. economy remains underwater with a slight 3-point improvement from last month. So technically it's quote unquote slightly improved. However, it's still in the negative, which could be used against Biden. Half of voters say that their financial situation is getting worse, which is, it's not really good. And as you can see, just off as well was a lot better, and improving was also much better during Trump's presidency, and getting worse, was a little bit lower here. And as soon as, 2021 kind of spiked up here, you kind of see this is at one point in the middle of 2022 is when Biden was like the most unpopular. That was the most unpopular he was. You're going to see more Americans are optimistic rather than pessimistic about their life over the next year. Slightly more voters think the U.S. will avoid a recession. For quite some time, we were kind of thinking that there was going to be a recession, like a Great Depression type of recession, but that didn't necessarily occur. Like, yes, prices did go up, people's financial situations did get quite a bit worse, interest rates did go up. However, it wasn't exactly like a Great Depression, like economic downturn that people were expecting. As you can see here, we'll be in recession next year. It's still 40%, so still kind of high, but it has gone down, and people saying we'll avoid a recession has gone up. So, and then people say is in recession right now, 32%, which that's a little bit debatable. We are technically in a recession, but the government was trying to change the definition of what exact metrics were. So it's very complicated. It kind of depends on your, household income and, what kind of things you're dealing with. Like clearly, if you're a real estate investor or you participate in real estate, you'll know that we're quote unquote in a recession because the inflation rates are a lot higher, and that tends to benefit real estate investors a lot because that's when, household properties and, properties in general just tend to appreciate over time. So that technically does help them. But if you're talking to like a regular person, NPC, that kind of just goes their job and whatever, they'll just be like, oh yeah, the price has gone up, but it's not really a recession because they're in their head, they think a recession has to be like you lose your house and all of that, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Biden's approval rating here is above 40%, which, it kind of makes sense in a way. Usually by the midterm year, it tends to go down quite a bit. And then as you get closer to the presidential election, slightly goes up. However, regardless, he's still in the gutter. He's still at 44%, like it says here, which is really not that good because Obama in 2012 was in the high 40s, not the mid 40s. And when Biden won the presidency, he had a 53% approval rating and barely won it across 3 states. So to make the argument that Biden's, there's like, let's talk elections likes to say, oh, Biden's, re-election bid is way stronger than we actually think it is, and blah, blah, blah. Now, I do think there are a lot of people that think that Trump's going to go in there and like slam dunk him like Obama style, or people think that any Republican could beat Biden. That's just simply not true. A lot of times people like to think of presidential elections as popularity contests, but especially in recent elections, you can't look at it that way, because a lot of people think that just because their community really hates Biden, it's not necessarily the same. And now with mail-in voting, you have a lot more voters that wouldn't really tend to get up of their couch in the morning, and they'll just send in their mail-in ballot. So now you get a bigger manosphere of people who have different views on the world in general and life in general participating in the elections. To be honest with you guys, Trump really lost to himself. Trump was not voted out of office because Biden was a great president or a great option even. He was seen as the alternative safe pick to Donald Trump. So a lot of Biden support is very soft support, and we're going to get to that later on in this video. But it really just goes to show, like, he basically had, some polls had Biden at like 60% approval rating in the beginning of 2021, which even myself, I kind of had a neutral opinion of him in the beginning of the year, because after a few months, I was like, oh, I mean, everything is fine. I mean, this, I guess, is not too bad. I didn't really like him that much, but it was like, okay, like, it's not terrible. And then afterwards, I was kind of like, yeah, no, this is not good. And then so now Biden, here's the problem. He remains underwater in key issues. 41% of the economy. Stimulating jobs is 49%, which I think is a little too high, to be honest with you. I don't really think that's like very accurate. Fighting terrorism is also too high. I don't think he's at 46%. Immigration, this again is a very big outlier poll for him, because really in the RCP aggregate, I think Biden's like in the high 20s, low 30s on this issue. So a lot of these are very skewed, like 43% on foreign affairs. This is just simply not true. He's doing a lot worse on the actual, aggregate polling, as well as administering the government, 45% not accurate. Reacting to the coronavirus, I guess you could kind of say that his approval rating, that's like his highest approval rating on the issue. But at the same time, like, this is not relevant to now, and I think 53% is way too high. I think in reality, it's really like 45 to like 48%. Dealing with violence in country and crime. This one is a little bit debatable, because this is more of a state thing, but I think that's roughly accurate. And then handling inflation, that's way too high. There's no way it's 40%. I just don't believe that. GOP approval remains shy of 50%, which, again, guys, this whole thing with the voting on McCarthy and, trying to get a new speaker, optically to, just regular voters and regular people, it's going to seem bad. But to be honest with you, I actually appreciate the GOP. As you guys know, I'm more of a conservative type. I actually appreciate the GOP actually having a standard, because at the end of the day, McCarthy agreed to a rules committee with a certain amount of people, and he broke those rules knowing that he had to follow them to let them get the speakership. So I don't really think it's more of a, because to be honest, I mean, I wasn't really following McCarthy's, leadership too much, other than I know he kind of screwed over a couple of House races, and he is kind of, into that Ukraine foreign aid thing, which I don't think we should be sending money to them, period. However, I do believe that, he was somewhat effective at his job, but I think it was mainly more about, you agreed to these rules, you broke them, you need to be held accountable. So I really do think the GOP actually, I think those members really did do the right thing. Now you have a point in time where now they're trying to get another speaker who arguably would probably be better than McCarthy, and that the Republican base would actually want, like a Jim Jordan or a Brian Donalds. And now other people are trying to stop that from happening. Like, the group that voted McCarthy out from the Republican side is not as high as the other Republicans that are trying to stop a new speaker from getting in. Like, there's like 20 to 30 something like Republicans that are quote unquote rhinos that are trying to stop this new speaker from getting in, whereas McCarthy's exit, all the Democrats and like 8 Republicans voted him out. So it's kind of like, in reality, there's a lot more people trying to stop, an authentic conservative from trying to get in the speakership than there was to even remove an unauthentic quote unquote conservative either way. Again, I appreciate the GOP for doing it, but not even a lot of Republicans, ones that tend to support DeSantis are like, oh, why are you doing that? But I actually think it's a good thing that they're kind of holding their members accountable, and we could kind of get more authentic America First conservatives in there. Now, the Democratic Party technically has a more of a positive approval rating nationwide. However, the thing about this is that the Democrats are better at keeping people together. There's technically more infighting within the Democratic Party in terms of political issues and social issues. However, when it comes time for the election, they all stick together like glue. And Republicans are not as good at doing that, hence why they have a higher perceived approval rating nationwide overall. Now, Congress has dipped to 30%, which, I mean, to be honest with you, that kind of does make sense. I wouldn't really be surprised. I do think it is pretty sad that we still don't have a speaker, except other people will blame it on things that I don't necessarily blame it on. Like, I blame it more on the rhinos, but more people just blame it on MAGA Republicans, which I just think is dumb. You see, it was at 40%, which I still think was way too high. I think on the aggregate, the highest point, it's like 30. I think in the aggregate right now, I think the average is like 15, if I'm not mistaken, something like that on RCP. RFK, this person, which I'm not going to pronounce their name, Haley and Musk have the highest net approval ratings. Now, this is where I'm going to be getting into something very, very huge. Donald Trump in this poll has a positive approval rating, which is never the case. Trump never ever gets positive approval ratings nationwide in any single poll. Not in the aggregate, not in 2016, not in 2020. The only polls I think that have had his approval rating up were like Rasmussen and like McClellan, which are like very right-wing polls. But for Harvard Harris to actually have Trump up nationally 3 points in the favorability is a pretty big deal. You can see Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has the same favorable as Trump, but has way less unfavorable. So his net, approval is the highest out of any of these candidates here, which I think as we get closer to the election, it's gonna start catching up to him, because right now, not as many people know about him, as Trump or Biden. So I think over time it's going to catch up to him. Kind of the same with DeSantis. It's roughly the same. Now, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, for some reason, are only -4 and -3, which I just don't think it's true. I think these are very, very skewed. But if you look at this, right, if you look at Trump's, strong disapproval and Biden's strong disapproval, they're roughly the same. However, Trump's strong favorables are much higher than Biden's. And actually, if you look at any of these people on the list, Trump has the highest very favorable rating out of any of the candidates here, which, to be honest with you guys, that's the most important part of elections. You need to get your base out. That's generally the most important thing here. And if you look at the strong disapproval, Biden's is the worst out of any of the candidates on these lists. So you're effectively getting Trump, who has the strongest favorable base, and you're getting Biden with the strongest disfavorable base, and you're putting them together in a head-to-head matchup. That's not going to be a good thing for Biden. Now, again, this doesn't mean he's guaranteed to lose. People, for some reason, think that Biden is going to win in a landslide or lose in a landslide. There's a lot of people that think that he's going to trounce Trump because of the indictments, which have literally been bouncing off of Trump anyways. And there's people that think Biden is going to just lose really badly, like 350 electoral votes. That's not going to happen. The election's going to be close regardless, and it's going to stay that way. You can see people like here, Jim Jordan technically has a neutral approval rating, 30% favorable, 30% disapprove. Mitch McConnell's in the gutter. You have Joe Manchin, in the gutter. Elon Homar in the gutter. Matt Gaetz in the gutter, apparently. This lady's in the gutter. This person's in the gutter. Gavin Newsom is in the gutter as well. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Mike Pence is in the negatives. Vivek Ramaswamy is +6. Tim Scott's +6. Haley is +10, which is pretty good because she's actually sitting at like 40%. Most voters view Israel favorably just behind the U.S. military and police. So you could see here, U.S. military's, 69% positive, 45% for the police, which is very interesting because I'd actually think this would be closer. Especially between all the Black Lives Matter stuff, you're gonna see this poll like favorability of institutions is very skewed because you look at Israel, it's plus 38, which does make sense, but like places like FBI, Ukraine, U.S. Supreme Court, even Department of Justice, CNN, Fox News are all in the positive. I would expect all of these to be in the negative, especially like Fox News and like CNN. Like those should be in the gutter. Both of those should be in the gutter, realistically speaking. So I think these polls are pretty inaccurate. I think these are all really big outlier polls. Inflation remains top issue for voters. You can see here 32% of voters say that prices increase and inflation is the highest issue out of any of the issues on here, as well as immigration and economy and jobs, which are all favorable to Donald Trump. Donald Trump's messaging on these topics is very, very effective. He is hammering away this in his rallies, in his speeches, when he goes and he talks to people. It gives off the sense that he is a common man in a sense. And when he's going to like getting everybody a blizzard, going to these pizza shops, going and seeing the police, the fire departments, going to these manufacturing jobs, especially when he did the union workers thing in Michigan a couple of weeks back during the second debate when he skipped it, he's going to really gauge his support. And really, guys, Donald Trump's messaging right now is way better than what it was in 2020 and in 2016, in my opinion. He's doing a lot better because he's combining his toughness, like really grumpy side from 2020, and getting his very populist economic messaging from 2016 and putting it together and actually coming across pretty good. And he's actually been a lot funnier nowadays. In 2020, I personally didn't like Trump before 2020, and after in 2020, I started liking him more, you know. And so, yes, I did find him funny, but I understood that the average voter or even some other people that were Republicans just genuinely didn't find him funny. In the debates, he came off as like a very angry, like Fox News grandpa, and it just didn't work. And so, now, I think his comedic timing, just the jokes he says, doing the Biden impressions, I think it's really funny and it's very interesting because they say Biden's age is the problem when in reality it's not necessarily his age. It's more his mental capacity and the fact that he probably has dementia. But that's, we'll get onto that in a second. But for example, like Bernie Sanders is much older than Biden and is like as sharp as ever, including Trump. I mean, Trump's a couple of years younger, but Trump is effectively way sharper than Biden ever is right now. As you could see, a lot of these very specific issues down here are very, very low, including weaponization of justice and FBI. However, you guys got to understand, just because this is the 32% and it's, oh my God, this is very important, doesn't necessarily mean that it's all going to go to Trump. Or, for example, guns is all going to go to Biden. Or like women's rights is all going to go to Biden. A lot of these up here are going to kind of split in half or go, somewhere, 6 and 10, like 6 and 4 kind of. However, race relations, it's probably all going to go to Democrats. Like these smaller ones here are all going to go to a certain party. So effectively, these smaller things make the difference in the smaller margins. Trump going on the offense about the weaponization of the justice system slash FBI is really, really effective. People think it's not going to be effective, but it is. Even if he does lose, he's still going to lose within like 500,000 votes minimum the election. If he were to even lose, that's like the worst he could possibly do, which means he'd probably lose North Carolina at that point. Inflation remains biggest issue across all party lines, which Trump could, hit him on that very effectively. You could see a quarter of Dems think it is, almost half of GOP voters think it is, and a decent plurality of independent voters do think it is as well. Midterms and horse races. This is where we're going to get into, Biden's, kind of approval rating and like some things about him. and the actual election, like kind of like the whatchamacallit, like actually going to head-to-head matchups. So if you look at majority continue to say they have doubts about Biden's mental fitness, you could say that a decent majority of voters say they have doubts, which these tend to be a lot higher, like way higher. Like 70% of voters say that he shouldn't even run for re-election, and 67% say he's too old, and some say he's fit, which tend to be very like you see it's very partisan Dem that tend to believe that. You can see 62% of them say he's still fit. So it's more of a partisan thing when you say that. However, most GOP voters and most independents say he's way too old, which is gonna really fuck him up in the general. You could say, mentally fit, which is weird. 73% of Dems say that that's the case, even though that's clearly not true. Trump in the primary. Now, this is where I need to lay down, like, all these DeSantis people, all these Nikki Haley, Mike Pence people, all these people. Oh, we're gonna, somehow outperform the polls by 40 points, and we're gonna get a victory in Iowa, and DeSantis is gonna come by and surprise everybody. And it's not gonna happen. It's not going to happen. Donald Trump at this point has the nomination on lock. The primary, the first one, is on January 15th, I believe, and we're in the end of October, guys. Like, Trump has got the nomination. Right now, all the other candidates should drop out and get all their resources, get all the money, and put it into a funding operation for mail-in ballots for Republicans. That's what they should be doing, but they're not. And DeSantis, guys, the reason why Trump calls him the sanctimonious and the reason why he lost half his support since he announced is because, number one, he was very disingenuous to Trump. I mean, Trump basically gave him the governorship pretty much in Florida, because what happened was Adam Putnam was going to be the supposed nominee, and DeSantis was in second place, but he was super duper behind. And he went to Trump and it was like, can you please endorse me? And he didn't. And he went up against Adam Putnam and he managed to beat him by kind of a lopsided margin. Like what Adam Putnam was supposed to beat DeSantis by, that's what DeSantis beat Adam Putnam by. Like, it was literally a whole 180 flip. And then in the general, Andrew Gillum, who was essentially like a crackhead and got arrested for DUI like 2 years ago, was up on DeSantis by 10 points in Florida, and Trump did all these rallies for him, and then DeSantis barely squeaked out a victory. So for him to go and then be like, okay, yeah, I'm going to run for president, even though I know Trump is probably going to run, it's really disingenuous, guys. I think it's really stupid that he did that, to be honest with you. I think it's really dumb. Again, I live in Florida. I actually think he's a pretty decent governor overall. Now, is he too conservative on some things for me? Absolutely. Is he too, yeah, I could say that, it is too much, and that's probably why he wouldn't even beat Biden in a general election. Guys, Trump has got the nomination on lock. Like, it's just, he's going to win it 100%. Like, there is no debate about this. Most voters think Trump will win GOP nomination, including 5 and 4 GOP voters. 80% of the GOP voters in this poll think Trump is going to win. And when you have that big of a gap in people who think you're going to win, you're probably going to win the nomination. Even a plurality of Dems actually think he's going to get the nomination. And for some reason, like, a majority of Dems think he's going to lose it, which is like really dumb. And then look, even a majority of independents even think Trump's going to win the nomination, which is also a good sign for him with independents, by the way. Trump remains the favorite in matchups with DeSantis and Haley. So all these people are saying, oh, well, if you were to actually get all the candidates and put it into one, and he'll beat Trump by like 5 points in a head-to-head matchup. No, look at this. 71% Trump, 29% DeSantis, and he performs even better against Nikki Haley. So he like clears the field with both of these. Now, Kamala Harris is the top choice should Biden not run in 2022 or 2024, excuse me. As you can see here, Kamala Harris is at 25%, Gavin Newsom's at 10%, Hillary Clinton's at 10% somehow. I don't know how. So apparently they're both up on Bernie Sanders, which honestly I would have imagined that Bernie Sanders would have been higher by now, but hey, it is what it is. And you kind of have all these candidates here and they kind of pile them all up. Andrew Cuomo is at 3%, which is funny as hell. But the fact that she's the incumbent vice president, she can't even get at least 33% in the primary or even over 40 is really bad, guys. Like, that's very, very bad for Kamala Harris. If Biden steps down and just doesn't run or he passes away or something, which God forbid, Guys, Kamala Harris would literally probably be DOA on in the general election. She'd be DOA. Even against DeSantis, I'd actually think DeSantis would probably be able to beat her. Like, it's that bad. I generally think that. Even though I don't think DeSantis would beat Biden, I think DeSantis would beat Kamala Harris, to be honest with you. And here is another important factor. Almost 2 in 3 voters say that Biden should not run for a second term, but 6 in 10 say the same for Trump. But effectively, there is about 10% more voters that think Biden shouldn't run than Trump. So even though a majority of people say Trump shouldn't run, he still has more people saying that he should run than he shouldn't. So this is going to really, really show through in the general, in my opinion. As you can see, 65% of Dems say that Biden should run, and a third of them say he shouldn't. And most of the GOP says he shouldn't run, and most independents say he shouldn't run. However, here GOP 75 to 25, so most of the party has Trump supporting, like a stronger majority than Biden does. And if you look here, more Dems say Trump should run than more GOP voters say Biden should run. So a lot of that crossover support, like Dems voting for Trump, it's going to, according to this, it's really going to show that Trump's going to get more Dems voters than Biden's going to get Republican voters either way. And if you look at this, 6 in 10 independents say Trump shouldn't run, whereas 72% of independents say Biden shouldn't run. So really, Trump is in a better position than Biden when it comes to running in general. Now, strong majorities across the political spectrum agree that the country is in need of another choice, which is very interesting. And this is where I'm going to get into how this favors Trump. 32% of voters say in the Dems say that Biden and Trump are good enough choices, whereas 43% say that Trump and Biden are good enough choices. Now, this means when a GOP voter says this, that means that when they're saying that, that means that Trump is a good enough option. And when the Dems are saying that, they're saying that Biden's a good enough option. So when you actually have real, authentic support, the GOP has a higher favorability here than the Dems do, because more Republicans think Trump is a good enough option than Biden, than Dems think Biden is a good enough option, which kind of shows the enthusiasm gap is really for Trump in this case. Majority of voters say they would consider voting for a moderate independent in a case of a Biden and Trump rematch, which, I mean, again, and look at this, more voters would not consider it in the GOP than in the Dems. So again, it's more of a, enthusiasm gap for Trump as well. This is where we get into the meat of the story. Trump, with undecideds, is beating Biden by 5 nationally. And with the leaners, he's beating Biden by 4 points nationally, which is essentially a coin flip from what it was last time. So I'm going to pull out the Electoral College map website and show you guys what a Trump plus 4 national environment would probably look like. I kind of already have the states filled out here. So in a Trump plus 4 national environment, Florida would effectively be over a 15-point win. Texas would be anywhere from about 10 to 12 points. North Carolina would be a 5 to 7 point win at that point. Connecticut, Delaware, Rhode Island would all be likely. Then you have New Hampshire, which I'll actually get to later. Maine at large would still be likely, as well as Maine's 2nd district. You'd have Colorado being likely. You'd have Alaska still being likely because it is trending to the left. You'd have Oregon be likely. And then you're kind of getting into the closer states. You're going to have Georgia be a lean state. You're going to have Nevada be a lean state. You're going to probably have Arizona even being a lean state, as well as New Mexico. Wisconsin would probably be likely at this point, to be honest with you guys, as well as Michigan. Pennsylvania would probably be likely too, including New Jersey being lean, as well as New Jersey being a lean Republican state, with Minnesota and Virginia being very big toss-ups, which I think that more than likely Minnesota would flip, as well as alongside Virginia and the 2nd district of Nebraska, which would put Trump at 340 electoral votes. Now, do I think he's going to win the popular vote by 4 or win by this amount? I don't believe that at all, guys. I don't believe Trump's going to win by 4 in the popular vote. I don't believe that he's going to win 340 electoral votes. We're too polarized for that to even happen. However, I do think that Trump still has a very high chance of winning. A lot of people say, oh, Trump can't win because of January 6th and all this stuff and whatever. That's just simply not true. Oh, the indictments are going to crush his campaign, like freaking LTE says. Like, that's just not true, guys. I'm not saying that Trump's guaranteed to win. He's not guaranteed to win the presidency. But at the same time, he's not guaranteed to lose either. He still has a very good chance to win the election, especially since he's either ahead of Biden or basically almost tied in a lot of polls. Now, some polls do have Biden up by 3 or 4, but in 2020, Trump never led a poll in the year 2020, nor was he up in the aggregate. I think there was a one Trump plus one poll after the RNC in 2020, and that was it. There was one poll, which was a right-wing pollster. That was it. Now you could see here, 15% of Dems would vote for Trump in a head-to-head matchup, and he's beating Biden with independents. Unlike these DeSantis people that say that Trump can't win independents. Look at this. This poll has him up by, I think it's like 8, something like that. It's like 8 points up with independents. Like, guys, yeah, with undecideds, he's doing pretty good. But even with leaners, he's actually beating Biden still. He's still beating him. Now, this is where the third party thing comes in. RFK is actually scoring very high in these polls. He's scoring very, very high numbers in this poll. If Trump were to win the popular vote by this amount, which is effectively R plus 6, you're talking about states like Illinois and New York being somewhat competitive. You're talking about even Washington narrowing up at that point. With RFK in the race, Trump has the political position to actually do very well and win in a freaking landslide and win by a huge amount and actually get some of these states very competitive. He'd win the Rust Belt pretty easily. He'd win Georgia very easily. He'd win North Carolina easily, as well as Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. Get very, very close in New Mexico, very, very close in Colorado. Get these very close. Win Alaska safe probably. And then you'd have likely here, well, actually these would both be lean at this point, and more than likely you'd probably have New Jersey end up flipping at that point, as well as like a likely New Hampshire. This would probably even flip, including a likely Maine 2nd district, as well as a safe one here, and likely here. So he'd win by even more with an R plus 6 national environment, because effectively RFK would take more votes away from Joe Biden, he'd take more votes away from Biden, which is going to be a very big problem for Biden in the election, especially since Biden does not have a very high favorable rating. Hence why a lot of, people are going to go to RFK, which would help him get more voters. You could see here, look, Joe Biden, Trump gets 70, well actually let's use the one with the leaners. Trump gets 80% of the GOP, and RFK gets 15% of it. As we're here, RFK gets 22% of Democratic voters, and Joe Biden only gets 69% of Democratic voters, with Trump getting 9% of Dem voters, where Joe Biden only gets 5% of Republicans. And here, Trump's only beating RFK with independents by like 2. And now, here's the question. At this point, if he's really winning 22% nationwide, you could probably look at states like Alaska or like Maine at large flipping, or like somewhere around here, or maybe even like a northeastern state maybe, or even like Oregon or like a Utah, actually. But for now, we're going to just assume that RFK wouldn't really flip any states, because it would actually be pretty hard for him to even win a state, even if he's getting 22%. But the fact he's polling this high is very, very interesting. They also did a poll where they included Cornell West as well. They also include Cornell West with RFK, and RFK is not leaving, guys. He's going to run. And Cornell West is also running. They've been in the talks for months to run. So if you were to leave them in, the polling is looking like this, guys. This is the scenario where Trump could actually win Obama style, because they're taking away a lot of votes from Biden. If you look at the poll here, Trump 80% GOP, here 80% GOP. Joe Biden goes down 3 points with Dem voters because Cornel West gets 3% of them. So really, the more third-party candidates you add, the more votes you're taking away from Biden. And now Trump beats independents against RFK by 3. So it's like, yeah, no, Trump, if he were to win, because this is 6, 7, R plus 7, guys, because you got to think about it. Biden won the popular vote by 4.5. last time, right? So that effectively be a negative 4.5. If you were to think about it in a number line, it's negative 4.5. And then you go up to, I believe it's 7. So really, it's positive 7, and you're doing like negative 4.5. So it's really like a 13.5 point swing to the right, guys, or an 11.5 point swing to the right, somewhere around there. You're really shifting the popular vote 11 points rather than only 3, if you were to think about it in a regular number line. It's really you're shifting every state by 11, which would mean that all of these would effectively already be here, as well as this, and this, which would already put Trump at winning the Electoral College already. So basically, the whole story of this is that Trump is really going to kill Biden if they add a lot of third party candidates. Now, look here, you can see Joe Biden is leading Ron DeSantis. Trump is leading Biden. And look at this. DeSantis is not getting as strong of a hold on the GOP as Trump is in these polls, mainly because of the high die-hard, GOP fans. He's also leading Haley in this poll as well, which she gets even less support from the GOP as well in this poll. Now here, Trump beats Kamala Harris by 6 with undecideds, which I don't even want to know with the leaners because he probably kills her. But if he's beating her R plus 6 in a head-to-head race, he's effectively going to make Illinois in New York competitive at that point. Now, funny enough, if you look at this, they're tied. Ron DeSantis and Kamala Harris are tied, which I think Ron DeSantis would beat her. And then you could see Harris is actually up by 2 on Haley, which is interesting. Now, the speaker race, you could see voters are split on ousting McCarthy after the budget deal, but agree it is hurting the GOP. So you could see those stats on that. Now, again, I think it was the right thing to kind of, it helps the GOP because it gives them an accountability standard. You could also see a lot of people think it's to help their careers who ousted him, which I actually do think it's, reduce government spending. I think that is definitely, I would have picked that answer. And I think you see, look at this D+2 generic ballot, which is very interesting. And it's effectively the parties are very split here, roughly the same. But then with independents, the Republicans are winning it by 2. Look at this. Most say that if a deal is not reached in 30 days, it is time to find a new speaker, then have McCarthy run again. And a lot of people say time to find somebody new, which is very interesting. All right, guys, so this is basically where I'm going to end the video. I hope you guys enjoyed the commentary on the poll. Hope you guys got a little bit more understanding of the political sphere right now. Again, this is not the most accurate poll. Some things could be a little bit skewed, but this just give a very good general, summarization of what the political environment's going on. Basically, Trump is leading Biden in the general election. He's leading the nomination. With third-party candidates, Trump is smoking Biden in the popular vote, which means he'd win a lot in the Electoral College. So that's pretty much it, guys. Like the video, subscribe for more content like this, leave a comment down below. So other than that, guys, I hope you take care. Have a good rest of your weekend. Goodbye.